You're listening to Parents, You've Got This, the expert guide to parenthood.
The complete guide to pregnancy, birth, baby and parenthood.
Navigating maternity leave and parental leave can be a bit of a minefield. That's why we have our return to work expert Kate Pollard on today to talk to us all about navigating this journey.
Kate is one of the founders of Circle In and Well, and she is passionate about supporting parents as they navigate this really, really important and exciting time. Thank you so much, Kate, for being with us today.
Absolute pleasure. It's great to be here.
So, Kate, there's so many terms around maternity leave, paternity leave, parental leave. What is the difference between all these different types of leave?
You're spot on. It's a bit confusing, isn't it? There's lots of terms. Look, I think the main difference is maternity leave refers to females or the woman taking parental leave, and paternity leave is all about the dads. But I think where it gets confusing is that probably traditionally it's been maternity and paternity, and that refers to anyone who's taking leave to look after a newborn child, or it could be an adopted child. But I think everyone's moving on from maternity and paternity, and we're kind of losing those gendered titles, and mostly people refer to it as parental leave, which is where the confusion I think comes in.
Now, this might be a question that is maybe just as relevant to both partners, but how does it work, and what would your strategies and recommendations be for a mother or a father who is announcing their pregnancy at work and starting to make those plans for what their parental leave might look like? What sort of tips would you give them for how to make that announcement? I remember I was so nervous. And then what sort of things can they be putting in place to make sure that it all goes as smoothly as possible?
Look, you're right. I think there's nothing more daunting than when you actually have to, lean in and say, oh, I'm pregnant, because I think there's that fear that it's going to change your career and everything changes from this point onwards. So yeah, it is a daunting, prospect, and I know myself, I don't think I announced my pregnancy till I was at least 20 weeks pregnant, so that was getting a little tricky trying to hide that. But, I think that the best thing to do is you really need to, prepare for it. It's like anything, prepare for that conversation. You don't have to tell your employer straight away that you're pregnant. It's really up to you when you want to tell them. But I think you don't want everyone else to find out about it before you've had a chance to tell your manager. So the most important thing is think about how you'd like to tell your manager, actually book a meeting with your manager. I think it's also important to sort of reinforce your commitment to your role, and that this is, you're going on parental leave. It's not going to change your career, and you're still as committed as ever to your, to your career. But, I think it's important to, then in that meeting, once you've actually, brokered the news, is to then work out how are you going to tell the rest of the team? What does that look like? Because I think it's important to have a plan around that too.
And when you're thinking about going on leave and talking to your boss about what that leave's going to look like, what your job's going to be when you return, what are some of the things that parents should consider well in advance of actually taking the leave?
Like anything, you want to do your research. So if you're not sure what your policies are that your workplace offer, go and check out your policies. Also go and have a look at the government websites. There's some great information out there, but you want to know what you're entitled to. And I think, once you are embarking on that journey of parental leave, you want to have a plan in place with your manager. So it's really important that you, talk to your manager about what you want your experience to look like when you're on parental leave. So we really suggest having a parental leave plan in place, and then, together you can kind of plan what that experience will look like.
Sometimes it doesn't go to plan, does it? And I imagine that it's important to stay in communication with your workplace while you're on parental leave. Do you have any advice around that? Is it that we should be checking in regularly, or do we just sort of leave it and then, get in touch at the last minute? Or what would your recommendations be?
Yeah, I think probably my main tip would be that, if you're preparing for parental leave, it's important, to think about how you're going to maintain those relationships for the work with your workplace. There's nothing worse than that feeling of being out of sight, out of mind, and that tends to happen when you just head off on parental leave. So there's a lot of work to do before you go on parental leave, like having a parental leave plan in place. Make sure you've done your performance review before you go. Let your manager know about, if there's any career aspirations, like there could be a job opportunity that comes up while you're on parental leave. And then make sure before you actually embark on parental leave, you've had that final conversation, you have everything lined up with your workplace. And it's really about being clear with your workplace about how you want that experience to look like. So yes, there's a couple of good tips.
Yeah.
And I think there's still sometimes a bit of a stigma around taking leave, and people are really worried how it's going to affect your career. And particularly if you're a man, you may be thinking you might not want to take parental leave. Do you have any tips around this?
Yeah, so unfortunately I think there's a lot of stigma around men taking parental leave even today. And so we've done 2 lots of research, one in 2018 and one in 2022. And unfortunately not a lot has actually changed. It's almost like men have to ask social permission to go on parental leave. And I think that's not a great place to be. What we do see though is that about 3/4 of men would like to take parental leave, but only 40% of their workplaces actually only offer it.
Wow.
So you can see there's a real disconnect there. What is really interesting though is that the younger generation coming through, 18 to 24, what you do see is that 100% of them, in the people that we surveyed, are wanting to take parental leave. So again, this next generation, the expectations have changed. So I think that is really encouraging, and that more people want it and are almost demanding it. And I think from a workplace perspective, if you're not getting on board and supporting your people taking parental leave, particularly dads, then you're not going to be that attractive for particularly the younger generation coming through. So, it is really important that we, we work through that stigma. From a workplace perspective, some of the practical things you can do are making sure that senior leaders are actually role modelling that behaviour and actually showing people that are going on parental leave who are in senior roles. And then, it's amazing how many dads then sort of say, yep, I'd love to also do that. And you can see then that the benefits of when you get a lot more dads taking paid parental leave, it's amazing how that flows on to, more people who follow in their footsteps. So they then take that back into the workplace. They understand what it's like to actually go on parental leave, and they're much more empathetic to people that are, following behind them. But it's also good at on the home level as well, when you've got dads taking parental leave. If you have dads taking parental leave, then you get much more shared division of the domestic duties at home as well.
Yeah, and more women returning back to work because, the fathers are at home caring for the babies
That's
as well.
exactly right.
Okay, I think it's just so important that we have these conversations, and it's really amazing to hear your tips, particularly around things like doing your performance review before you go away, making sure that everybody's really clear on what the plan is. Do you have any tips or suggestions around what to do if your plan changes? So obviously, we want things to go to plan, but sometimes things don't go to plan. Is that just a matter of keeping in touch with your employer and making sure you stay top of mind, or would you have any suggestions around that?
Yeah, I think it's a tricky time because particularly if it's your first child, going on parental leave, you don't know what you don't know.
Yes.
And sometimes things change, your circumstances change. So I think it's just really about keeping those lines of communication open with your workplace. Your manager is not a mind reader, and I think the best thing you can do is just really stay in touch, reach out to them, and tell them what would help in terms of the practical support that they could provide.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Kate, for coming on the Expert Guide to Parenthood today. A huge thank you to Miss Stella for sponsoring this episode. You've been listening to the Expert Guide to Parenthood, and never forget, parents, you've got this.
Join a Parents You've Got This masterclass today to be prepared, excited and educated for pregnancy, birth, baby and parenthood. Visit www.parentsyouvegotthis.com.au and sign up for a masterclass today.